Between the shocking crime, the public's fascination, thousands of dollars being raised in support of an alleged murderer, and a new prominent lawyer jumping in on the case, the story of Luigi Mangione, the suspected shooter of the United Healthcare CEO, is everywhere right now. And with a case this high profile, we need to break it down with a lawyer who knows what it's like trying a case in front of the world, Johnny Depp's lawyer, Ben Chew. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Arguably the biggest crime story right now in the country is that of 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, the suspected killer of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, who was gunned down in Midtown Manhattan in New York back on December 4th. Now, this father of two, husband, son, brother, was gunned down outside of the Hilton Hotel while on his way to an investors conference that morning. And look, I have to emphasize who Thompson was, because instead of remembering that he was a human being who was killed in cold blood, so much has been made of the suspected shooter, Mangione. Not necessarily his legal case or the evidence, but we'll talk about that, but this praising of him online. And that has been particularly fueled by people's anger and resentment against the healthcare industry. And with that in mind, I mean, a legal defense fund has been raised for over $100,000 for Mangione for his legal fees. I believe now it's even over $110,000. And this was started by a group called December 4th Legal Committee. And on the crowdfunding site called Give, Send, Go, the group writes, "Not here to celebrate violence, but we do believe in the constitutional right of fair legal representation." And it's interesting thinking about that money, considering it's been reported that Mangione is now being represented by a high-profile, high-powered attorney in New York, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, used to be a chief assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office. That is the same office now planning on prosecuting Mangione. And by the way, he is facing criminal charges in New York, including second-degree murder, but the evidence still needs to be presented to a grand jury for Mangione to officially be indicted in order for the case to move forward. And by the way, it is being reported, including by ABC News, that New York prosecutors are already presenting evidence to a grand jury. But look, I gotta say, what is the likelihood of a grand jury actually indicting him? Will they even look at the evidence? Will a jury at a future trial, if he is indicted, will a jury at a future trial even hand down a conviction? Because on one hand, you have arguably a tremendous amount of digital and forensic evidence against Mangione, and it's probably only going to increase. But would a jury feel sympathetic to him? Would there be jury nullification? Would they just let him off the hook? It's a real issue, given this public support for him. And we know that Agnifilo will be at the center of it. And right now, Mangione is also being represented by Pennsylvania lawyer Thomas Dickey, because Mangione is currently locked up without bail in Pennsylvania. He was arrested out in a Altoona McDonald's after he was spotted in there. This is based on the surveillance photos from New York of the suspected shooter in various locations, including, by the way, this unmasked photo of potentially the suspect in a hostel. So he's currently facing charges in Pennsylvania when he was arrested, because when he was arrested, he was found with or allegedly found with a 3D gun, a suppressor, fake IDs, including allegedly presenting one to police. So he's facing charges in Pennsylvania with respect to that. It's a separate question of whether or not those charges will move forward. Were they placeholder charges to keep him in custody while he is ultimately being brought up on charges in New York? Hey, by the way, we want to keep on following this story for you as it develops. And with that in mind, I have to thank our sponsor, Upside, because it's with their support that helps make episodes like this possible. Now, Upside's awesome. It is a free app that helps you get cash back when you buy daily essentials like gas, groceries, food. This is real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. Look here. I used Upside to find a gas station near me. I claimed an offer on Upside, paid with my credit card at the pump, followed the steps on the app, and I got cash back. It is super simple, and you can use Upside at all different kinds of places, restaurants, convenience stores. So to find out how much you could earn, you click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code SIDEBAR, because you get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Hope you can check it out. There is a question if he will continue to fight his extradition to New York. And there are a lot of moving parts to this. So with such a high-profile case, we thought, let's get some perspective from a high-profile lawyer, Ben Chew. I mean, talking about a case that everyone in the country and abroad was watching Johnny Depp. It's great to have your perspective because almost every eyeball is focused right now on Luigi Mangione. Thank you so much for coming on, Ben. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Jesse.
So I have to start with your thoughts on the amount of money in this legal defense fund that's been raised for him. You know, look, he is a criminal defendant. He is innocent until proven guilty. And despite the message that they're not advocating violence or supporting violence, don't you find it interesting that so much money has been raised for the suspected shooter of a CEO of one of the largest health insurance companies in the country?
Yeah, I find it stunning on two levels. One, because of the nature of the alleged underlying crime, which is just cold-blooded murder. And two, that he apparently is of a very wealthy family. So I'm not sure that he's not an indigent defendant. He comes from a wealthy family and probably doesn't need that money for his defense fund.
Does it bother you that this money has been raised, or you say, hey, listen, look, any criminal defendant is entitled to a defense, and maybe his family, maybe, I don't even think it's anybody's, look, I can't speak for everybody, but I don't even think it's about, hey, we know you don't have the money, but maybe this is a sign of us showing our support for you in your case.
Yeah, Jesse, I certainly agree with you that everybody is entitled to the best defense possible. And the more serious the offense, the more important it is for him or any criminal defendant to have really good defense. But it is disturbing that this really isn't about the facts of the particular case. It appears to be about a coarsening of our society that this act can engender so much support.
And what do you make, and I'll get to that a little bit more because something happened in Boston I have to bring everybody's awareness to, but what do you make of him selecting Karen Friedman Agnifilo, who, by the way, for anybody who's been following Sidebar, she is married to Mark Agnifilo. He's representing Sean Diddy Combs in his federal case out in New York. So you have a very high-powered couple, legal couple, but what do you make of him retaining her? This is somebody who has experience in the Manhattan DA's office.
Well, it shows that he is quite sophisticated, or he has access to sophisticated friends, which is not very surprising in light of his background. He's a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, so doubtless he has friends and associates who have access to knowledge and who know who the go-to lawyers are. So that part of it doesn't surprise me too much.
What advice would you give her? Because a spotlight is going to be put on her the same way a spotlight was put on you and the rest of the lawyers in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. I mean, you guys were like the main stars. I mean, everybody knew about you guys, knew about your past, were following you. You walked outside of the courthouse. People were cheering. People were coming up to you. I mean, this is going to be probably her most high-profile case that she's ever covered. What advice would you give to her?
I would advise her, keep it simple. Go ahead and do what you normally would do. And remember that, and you've heard me say this before, he is your client and you are representing him. So do whatever is in his best interest and try to block out everything else. You can enjoy, the accolades if there are any after the case is over, but her case, her job is to be laser focused on whatever is best for her client. And I'm sure she will be. There's no reason to think she'll be anything but dedicated to his best interests.
Can the public's reaction, the reaction online, be a distraction to the case at all? Could it be problematic representing a client like this?
Definitely. If she pays more attention to what she's seeing on social media, yeah, it can definitely be a distraction. And for example, I don't think she should take much heart in sympathy coming in for her client, this anti-insurance company, because I'm not sure that it's going to help him ultimately either in the grand jury or in the jury, because I have I know we're getting to this, but I think she needs to stay laser focused on what his best legal defense is going to be and not rely on any support from social media, because that might be helpful in the media, but I don't think it's going to necessarily help her client.
So I am confident to say, from a legal point of view, and I'll get into a list of the evidence, There is enough evidence for probable cause to get an indictment back in New York on second-degree murder and weapons possession charges. I'm confident in saying that. I will say legally there is enough probable cause because it's a lower standard. It's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just, is there enough evidence to suggest that potentially a crime was committed? Probable cause here to move this forward, to get an indictment. But let me go back to my main question. Despite all that, there is this, I don't know what the word is, sympathy or understanding or praise for Luigi Mangione, assuming he's the one who committed this crime. And I wonder, would a grand jury, and you and I both know that there's not necessarily a voir dire process with grand jury as there is with an actual trial. Would they look at this and say, you know what, I don't want to indict this guy? What do you think? Is that crazy I'm thinking like that?
No, it's not crazy at all. And it's a great distinction you just made about the lack of voir dire in a grand jury as opposed to a trial on the merits, because if to the extent that he gets to trial, I think there are ways of weeding out those people who might be tempted to engage in jury nullification. It's not foolproof, but I'm confident about that. But I think the prosecutor should be skilled enough to say, look, you need to put aside any animus you have with respect to insurance companies. This was somebody who was gunned down in cold blood, a man who had a wife, who had kids, and that's what you need to focus on. And to the extent you have sympathies, well, that's something that the next jury can consider. Your job is just to determine probable cause. And I think, and I'm speculating, and you may well be right, maybe there will be jury nullification at the grand jury level, but I think they are going to indict him under these facts.
Let's explore that. So maybe he'll be indicted, maybe not, because let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. It's been reported there was this dance party that was being held called the Bop to the Top Tours Jingle Bop that was held at this venue in Boston called Big Night Live. A lot of people. And the DJ ends up putting on the screen pictures of Mangione. The crowd just starts cheering and going nuts. One of the clips was shared on TikTok, and it has now over 1.2 million likes. So when I think about this, let's say, Ben, let's say a grand jury does indict him. You talked about there might be ways during the jury selection process at a trial to weed out maybe stealth jurors who want to go on there and get him off, or jurors that might have a bias against the health insurance industry or have sympathy for this man. How do prosecutors look into all these jurors? Do they go on their social media accounts? Do they ask them questions about their relationship with the health insurance industry, their family's relationship? How do you weed out jurors? Because it's not like a change of venue would solve a problem. The health insurance affects everybody in the country.
Yeah, that you put your finger on it. And poked a hole in my thesis, because I think you're right. I think it's going to be very difficult to do that, and I'm not even sure it's worth the effort. I think you just have to, you have to present the facts and hope they're willing to do the right thing, because I think you're right. That level of antipathy is probably spread throughout the United States, and you're not going to get a change of venue anyway. I mean, this is where the crime took place.
By the way, how much of it is also based on his looks? You know, it's one thing, the idea, let's call a spade here. But it wasn't just what he allegedly did, but he's also an attractive guy who's physically fit. That's a factor. How does the defense and how do the prosecution work on that? Because that could help him.
No question about it. I think you're exactly right. And his physical appearance, he likely, well, he's not going to be testifying, but he is, there are aspects certainly that are about him that are appealing, and his appearance does matter for sure. It does matter in any trial, civil or criminal. How your witness, how your client looks is very important.
I wonder if the prosecutors say this is a wealthy, privileged guy, he shouldn't be praised. He had every opportunity. I wonder if prosecutors can kind of try to paint it that way.
I think they should. And that was kind of, I was trying to touch on that earlier. I mean, yes, there are some appealing aspects of him, but there are a lot of non-appealing aspects. And I think the fact that he was a rich kid from Maryland who went to private school, I think that can be used against him. He had options, and by the way, I don't believe he even was ever enrolled. I don't think United Healthcare was his insurer.
No, he wasn't a client. And it goes to this idea of, one of the beliefs that I personally have is if he wasn't stopped, he might have been trying to go after other CEOs. Again, allegedly, if he really did do this, I think there's a fair question about, was Brian Thompson his only target or one of many targets? Not entirely sure. We'll see where the evidence goes. It's speculation. And again, he is innocent. He is innocent until proven guilty. But the evidence we'll talk about in a second. I think it's crazy because when I talk about the public's reaction, it's being reported by WKEF that Peak Design, this is the company that made the backpack that was worn allegedly by the shooter, which was found in Central Park, that they have been receiving threats because there were rumors that the backpack helped police track down Mangione. So the CEO had to come out and say, look, we didn't provide information to police, and the backpack didn't have a unique identifying number either. So if that's true, that's crazy that they had to come out and actually defend themselves. But again, that's what we're talking about. And let's put that to a side for a second, because let's talk about the evidence. So the evidence in this case is, so far, authorities say the shell casings match the 3D gun that was found on Mangione, that Mangione's fingerprints match those found on a water bottle and candy bar that were found near the scene and presumably bought it at the nearby Starbucks that the suspect had gone to before the shooting. The surveillance photos of the shooter, including at the Starbucks, the hostel, near the scene, in the taxi, presuming they are all him, that he was allegedly found with a Faraday bag, fake IDs, suppressor, 3D gun. I won't even get into the writings yet, because Mangione was found with this manifesto and notebook that had these writings that could be problematic. But before we even get into that, Ben, just what do you think about that other evidence so far we have in the case?
Jesse, I think it's overwhelming, and I think that's why ultimately I think there will be an indictment.
Yeah, and on top of the fact that, let's go into the writings now. So Mangione was found with this manifesto, this notebook that had writings that could be problematic, that could be interpreted as a confession, although there might be ways to say that he didn't actually confess to killing Thompson. But here are the things the writing said. To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. I do apologize for any strife of trauma, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. And then the writings go on to say about United Healthcare that the company has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No, the reality is these have simply gotten too powerful and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit. So Ben, when you see that, I'm struggling to make what the defense could potentially be. I've spoken to legal analysts who said insanity might be an avenue to go through. I don't technically see it because I think a lot of the evidence would suggest this is a knowledge of what you did, and escaping the scene seems to suggest you know that you broke the law. But again, what do you see about what a possible defense could be here?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because insanity would be a natural defense. I think in addition to what you cited, I think there's some writings to the effect of he did it with the gun rather than a bomb because he
Correct.
didn't want to kill innocent people. And that really shows, in addition to what you've said, that he understood the difference between right and wrong. And that is a key component of successful insanity defense, that you have to show that he was incapable of distinguishing between right and wrong. And here, in his own words, he's saying, look, I know killing innocent people is wrong. That's why I did this killing in a particular way. I think it makes an insanity defense very difficult. And then I think you're left with what you opened this segment with which is jury nullification. Can we get somebody on the jury who has such an antipathy toward insurance companies or the insurance industry that they're willing to be disingenuous in the voir dire and acquit him despite what he's done?
I believe Thomas Dickey, his Pennsylvania attorney, had said that he wants to see what evidence New York has because there are ways to fight against it, right? And so maybe one of the ways is to say, can we trust the ballistics evidence? How can we trust the fingerprints? Was there contaminations? Was it collected the proper way? There's different ways to just challenge the evidence. But overall, thinking about it, I mean, one of the reasons I think people are talking about an insanity defense is because of the outbursts made by Mangione. Like the idea of controlling a client. When he was being led to his extradition hearing in Pennsylvania, he made an outburst where he allegedly said it's completely out of touch, it's an insult to the intelligence of the American people and its lived experience. And it's being reported that his attorney, Thomas Dickey, in court in Pennsylvania, had to say to him, don't say a word, I'm the lawyer, I'll do the talking, because Mangione allegedly tried to say something. I don't know if that's that problematic if you're trying to argue insanity and he's saying this stuff, but B, how would you handle that? How would you handle a client like that?
Well, that's extremely difficult. And I think you have to be very hard with the client in that circumstance that first of all, I'm sure he was warned before that to be quiet. But the first time the client breaks that admonition, I think you make it very clear to him that you are going to seek leave to withdraw from the representation if he ever does it again, and that he's going to have to find a new lawyer. You've seen, I'm sure, in the recent proceedings with former Mayor Giuliani, he's had many outbursts in court. Now that's in the context of a civil case, but ultimately his lawyers did seek to withdraw, and the court ultimately did grant the motion to withdraw based on repeated outbursts where the lawyers said, I'm your lawyer, Mr. Mayor, you must subside. But going back to your question as to whether that helps his insanity defense, maybe a little bit. But there have been a lot of clients you've reported on who have had similar outbursts in court who have not been deemed insane. So it might be somewhat helpful, but not necessarily. He may be just wanting to have this be part of his soapbox. And that may be one other thing, Jesse. I mean, putting aside the legal defenses, he may want to have his day in court to give forth in a very public way his manifesto. He may not care about his conviction. He may have already crossed the Rubicon in terms of, now that's not what his lawyer wants, but he may just want to have his day in court not to prove his innocence, or create a reasonable doubt as to his guilt, but to really expound on what he believes to be the evils of our healthcare system.
An interesting point. And look, Thomas Dickey, his lawyer in Pennsylvania, told CNN about that outburst. He's irritated, agitated about what's happening to him and what he's being accused of. But there is a legal fight going on. So before I let you go, Ben, I just want to ask you real quick about extradition. So at the time of this broadcast, or the time of this recording, I should say, New York Governor Kathy Hochul said that she is working on the appropriate paperwork to get Mangione back to New York because she said, quote, because that horrific attack occurred on our streets, the people of our city deserve to have the sense of calm that this perpetrator has been caught and he will never see the light of day again. Now, it's our understanding his attorney had been contesting extradition, but then Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg said last week, indications are that the defendant may waive, meaning may waive extradition, but that waiver is not complete until a court proceeding, and it's our understanding that might happen tomorrow. So Ben, he was fighting, why do you think he was fighting extradition? Was it to give his legal team more time to prepare and for the evidence and see what might be there? And why would they waive it? Is it what would be the change in terms of their view on extradition?
I think he was fighting it to gain time, to find out, as you said, what is the quality of the evidence, what's the content of the evidence. You know, time is on his side in that sense. And I think why you would waive it is his counsel may have decided that he's already gleaned whatever intelligence he's going to get, and why wage a battle you're going to lose. And if my theory is right, and I'm not sure theory may be too strong a word, but if he wants to explain what his cause is, better to do that in New York than in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and look, I should tell you, we don't traditionally have cameras in the courtroom unless there's exceptional circumstances. If the judge allows it, I do wonder, would that be one of these exceptional circumstances? Given the public's view on this, would the judge want the world to see the evidence being put forward in this case? We'll see. We're not up to that point yet, but I'll tell you what, Ben Shu is always with us, always here to break it down. Love your perspective. Ben, thanks so much. It was great seeing you.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.